Meanwhile, the mining-affected communities United in Action has slammed Minister Mchunu for allegedly being xenophobic during an engagement with families of affected illegal miners. The organization's Vala Umgodi decries the lack of urgency in retrieving the illegal miners from underground. It's estimated that scores are still underground in that disused shaft.
During the presentation, one of the concerns that we had was the narrative, the continuous narrative of the xenophobic narrative that the minister's messaging was more focused on that many of the, or majority of the zamas are foreign nationals. He kept repeating that message. The second concern was then not being clear as to when will the rescue plan would actually start, particularly the extractive side of things, when we take people from underground and resurface them. So those are those concerns. The third concern was the lack of showing the agency in terms of identifying or regarding the zamas as people, as human beings. The narrative of bringing in their nationality vis-a-vis the current situation that they're facing. The issue of what is happening in Stilfontein is the issue of life and death. So that thing of focusing on their nationality as to saving their lives was some of the concerns that was around the room, generally amongst many community members.
For more on this, I'm now joined by Mametlwe Sebei, an attorney at Lawyers for Human Rights. Mr. Sebei, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. We saw that very heated engagement between the minister and some of these stakeholders. What was your take on this, especially as part of your organization, having been on the ground for the last couple of days and really experiencing and expressing some of your views around this issue?
I mean, obviously, what was supposed to be, a feedback session was a disappointment in terms of deliverables you would have expected from such a meeting. Let's just recap. One is that this, or rather, last time that the minister was there, he promised that rescue would have happened within a few days. They didn't keep that deadline. The MEC extended that, said the previous Monday, and that is when they decided to stop the community rescue that was going on at that time. And here we are, 2 weeks later, not a single person has been rescued by them. If anything, they cannot even tell those families as to when are they going to be able to retrieve their loved ones from the surface, to the surface. And what are we doing here? The community was saying, look, we can bring them on our own. Obviously, if you can be able to bring professional rescue with specialized, equipment that is more safe, more efficient than our own physical labor and a manual and rope system of pulling them 3 kilometers underground, we would appreciate that, but let us continue rescuing them ourselves. And in the meantime, and to the extent that the rescue effort is going to take time, we will need to agree that there are provisions with a sufficient amount of food, water, and medication to keep them alive, pending the rescue. Now, when you listen to the minister, he had no report on that. And he has failed, and all that he did, he spent about 70% of his speech talking about nationality of those mine workers. Now, there are problems with the statement, right? Firstly, it is true that there are migrants, but anybody who knows the history of mining industry in this country would even be surprised. How is that even an issue in this day and age? Because you would know when the people in this country, I'm from Limpopo, I know that my people resisted white colonialists drafting them into the mines, and so are many South African, South African people in those days and so on. What did, landlords do at the time? They drafted migrant black laborers from all over the subcontinent, Mozambique, Lesotho, and so on, So that has always been the composition of that industry and so on.
But sorry to interject there, Mr. Sebei, does it make it right with the minister emphasizing the fact that many of those that are currently underground are not South Africans and are in the country illegally? Does what we've seen historically then make it right for the fact that they are currently underground for these rescue efforts to take place?
Well, I'm just saying that the problem with artisanal or rather illegal mining, as you characterize it, right? It is a fact here that the big mining corporations have abandoned this mine, including the very migrants that they have recruited. Let's understand how the mining industry works, right? There is Taba Offices, which is a recruitment agency of the mining industry that has offices in Lesotho, in Mozambique, and quite a number of countries. And of course, in Eastern Cape, they recruit people there. When they close a mine, they don't even have a plan to say, how then do we ensure that these people that we brought from those countries are actually taken back, reintegrated and supported in such a way that their labor sending, communities that over 100 years have built their local economies on the basis of remittances from this particular mining industry become sustainable, let alone the local communities themselves, where because of colonial extractivism that defined this industry, that is where obviously the mining industry, which is predominantly foreign-owned multinational corporations, comes here to plunder the resources and ship it raw as they are without beneficiation, diversification of local economies, and they do that on the basis of the cheapest labor with a complete disregard for the laws of the country when it comes in particular to environmental and their social obligation to ensure closure of those mines, rehabilitation of that land so that people can use it for housing, for farming, and whatever other productive purposes, that communities are skilled but also economically equipped with resilient economies that can be able to sustain those communities post mine closures. What these big mining companies are doing is that they simply abandon everybody there. Right. Migrants that they got from Lesotho, wherever, they just dump them there. People that are from Eastern Cape, everywhere. And when that happens, people are unemployed, people are poor, people are desperate in the context of starvation and hunger. They engage in this. And I think there is a way in which government can be able to resolve this crisis, particularly in a context where there is a problem of organized criminal syndicates that have stepped into that vacuum that obviously are linked with networks of illicit trade on minerals. And of course, those networks of illicit trade on minerals, first and foremost, are operated by the big mining companies, which UN Convention on Trade and Development shows that we are losing 62 billion US dollars. To put it that in South African terms, that is over 1.1 trillion rands in illicit financial flows, but massive number of which is, of course, from the mining industry and through misinvoicing of trade on minerals between South African subsidiaries that are actually mining and, of course, their foreign-owned multinational corporations that are based in London, US, Canada, Australia, right, wherever that they are based.
I mean, the minister spoke about the poor communities in and around that mine, and many of them have people who are unemployed. Do you believe that the government is doing the right thing in trying to find a balancing act in this current operation and trying to save these miners and still being cognizant of the millions that are being spent during this rescue mission within a community of people that are starving?
You see, I mean, he's disingenuous. His own engagement tells him that lots of people that we have seen there are actually South African families that want their loved ones. It is in the face of them impossible to promote a false narrative that he has, and he even tried to repeat in the opening lines of his speech, that all these people are just migrants, when in actual fact, the evidence on the ground shows that the majority of them are actually South African, right? And the reality is that, like many other poor people, including migrants, of course, they are forced by conditions of abject poverty, squalor, but also hunger and starvation, right, into these horrific conditions of occupation in which they are trying to eke out a living to sustain themselves, their families, and so on. What is it that needs to happen? What is very clear is that we have a massive crisis of unemployment. There is over 12 million people that are unemployed in this country. And that, in a context of lack of any other alternative means of income, is related to poverty, is related to violence, starvation, and all of that. We need to be able to say, we have over 6,100 mines that are abandoned by the big mining companies. So what are we going to do about them? Are we going to look at all these mines and say, well, until big companies from Canada, from US, and wherever that they come from, come here and mine our minerals, we're not going to do anything about it? No, our demand is, one, for those that are already engaged in artisanal mining, regularize it, support them with equipment, but also access to markets so that they are able to trade legally, and in that way, you are able to then isolate organized criminal syndicates, which, by the way, are linked to the corrupt elements in the state, particularly among the police, that are assisting these networks and ensuring impunity, at the same time as they are also linked with corporations that are trading on these very same minerals internationally. More than that, we say government need a program to ensure that over 2,300 of these mines that are abandoned and still have sufficient minerals are reopened by a government program on the basis of which we can be able to create millions of jobs that we need. I mean, just think about it. If over 2,500 of these mines still has the mineral resources, and on average they employ about 2,000, that is 5 million jobs. So are we going to say until some Europeans, some Chinese, some Americans come here and mine, we are going to just be holding all of these minerals, leaving the mining industry with such enormous potential to eat away at horrific levels of unemployment? That is just a government that is bankrupt, that is impotent in a face of a crisis of unemployment and poverty. And that's the reason that we are going to be building a campaign to say, hand over these thousands of mines that are abandoned, hand them to communities, so that communities are able to create jobs on the millions that we need. They can beneficiate minerals from those mines to reindustrialize the country and, in fact, eliminate unemployment, but also ensure that we have a robust economy that doesn't just depend on colonial extractivism of the mining industry.
Of course, you've made your point. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That's Mametlwe Sebei, an attorney and lawyers for human rights, speaking to us there on the back of the Minister of Police, having that roundtable discussion at Stilfontein and saying that phase 3 will be implemented in terms of the rescue operations next week.